Morning, everyone, and welcome to the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, Placer County Local Transportation Authority meeting. Today is Wednesday, February 26th, and we will begin with the flag salute by council member.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll go roll call. Have roll call.
Bernasconi. Broadway.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Burris.
Here.
Cortez. Here. DeMattei.
Here.
Dowden Calvillo. Jones.
Here.
Wilkins.
Present.
Quorum.
Okay, and next I'm going to ask the clerk to read the meeting procedures.
Thank you. Agendas are available outside the chambers on the back table or on the PCTPA website. All comments from the public should be directed to the board. All speakers must speak from the podium as the meeting is being recorded. For those who are joining us by Zoom webinar, you can signal you wish to speak by clicking the raise hand button on the Zoom window. If you are joining by phone, press *9 and staff will call out individuals who have indicated they wish to speak. If you would like to comment on an item that is not listed on the agenda, please do so under public comment listed as item F on the agenda. In addition, the Brown Act requires the public have the opportunity to comment on all items on the agenda. Please limit your comment to 3 minutes. The time will be monitored, and once the yellow light appears at the podium, the speaker will have 1 minute to conclude their comments. Lastly, the board asks that you consider stating your name for the record this morning. Thank you for your participation.
Okay, moving on to item C, agenda review. Matt?
No action on item C. Agenda remains unchanged.
Okay, and we're going to move to item D, AB 2449. Take it away, Matt.
No action relative to AB 2449. Everybody's here and present.
Okay, item E then, approval of the minutes from January 22nd, 2025. Has everyone read and or reviewed the minutes? Any comments, questions, changes?
There being none, I'll move approval of the minutes for January 22nd.
I second.
Okay, motion by Broadway, second by Cortez. I've got to write these names down. I'm on the spot. I can't remember anybody's name. All right, motion is second. All those, no roll call or?
We don't need roll call.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, moving on to item F. Public comment. Persons may address the board on items not on this agenda, but please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone online?
There is someone on.
Fine.
Okay. I guess I should have asked about the chambers first, huh?
I need to allow him to speak, please.
Okay, hi.
Good? Peter,
Yeah,
we
so-
can hear you.
Oh, we can hear. Okay, my name is Peter Eklund. I'm a 14-year resident of Rockland. My comment today involves the update to the Title VI plan. The previous plan was dated June 22nd, 2022, and since then there's been a lot of information available regarding best practices, and I'm concerned that the PCTPA really is not up to date on what best practices are for public engagement. COVID area activities seem to be what the agency wants to continue to pursue, and that really is inadequate. And so I provided the comments I provided by email, I think are self-explanatory, and there's 2 documents that I have sent to Solvi that describe in detail. And I checked the 2 versions, and there hasn't really been any changes that are significant. So I just like staff to look at what I've sent and try to come up with something that's improved over what was done during the COVID. My other comment right now is really let's try to improve the public engagement process. I have just 3 examples. One of them involves the development of the equity plan. It would have been very simple to have a virtual meeting to discuss that plan, which was very important and actually is well done, but to have some discussion or collaboration before, the final approval by the board. That's a very simple one. The next one, which involves the existing development of the Placer County Transit Comprehensive Operations Analysis. The scope of work for that plan had no in-person public meetings or workshops and had up to 12 virtual public meetings. What actually happened in actuality, indeed, there were no in-person public meetings, and up to 12 virtual meetings was reduced to 2 meetings. These 2 meetings were held on one day with the same agenda and were done at a time when the final document had already been finalized by the study team. So basically, there was no public engagement. The problem is that for transit planning, there are clear winners and losers. In particular, riders need to have input because they're the backbone of the system. You want to retain your riders while trying to get new ones. There's no attempt to even talk to riders. For Route 20 in Rockland, every existing rider will experience a decrease in level of service. In many cases, the travel time will increase by 2 times. In some cases, instead of 3 times, it's now 7 times longer trip.
Can you wrap
east
up your
and
comments?
west.
I'm sorry, but your time has expired.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else?
No.
Anyone in the audience like to make a comment? Okay. All right, seeing none, then we're going to move on to item G, the consent calendar for the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. Anyone like to remove anything from the consent calendar for discussion? No? Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Cortez, second by Broadway. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Please make note that our Director Davin Calvillo has arrived.
Sorry to be tardy.
Oh, no worries. You're here. That's the important thing. Okay, let's move on to item H. Also consent calendar for Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. Does anyone wish to discuss, talk?
Nope, I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Motion by Broadway and second by Brown. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, item I, SACOG 2025 Blueprint. It's like Corey. Oh, we have a guest.
Yeah, but thank you, Chair. I'm going to give a little bit of an intro and context, and then I'll pass it off to Clint Holdson, who's from SACOG. Good morning, board members. Corey Peterson, Senior Transportation Planner. So the presentation you're about to hear from SACOG is in regards to their 2025 Blueprint effort. I just wanted to give a little bit of context about what this plan is and how it relates to our efforts with our regional transportation plan. SACOG prepares what they call their 2025 Blueprint every 4 years. So this is their Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy for the 6-county Sacramento region, of which Placer County is one of the 6 counties. This plan is intricately interrelated with our regional transportation plan that we're currently updating as well. We work very closely with their staff. We do a joint call for projects for both plans. We collaborate closely on data requests and kind of the contents of both plans. So Clint's going to be giving this presentation. They're doing a road show. They're going to be at every single one of your councils. I believe they were at Auburn a couple weeks ago. They're going to be making their rounds to each of your boards and councils over the next couple months, but we wanted them to come and give a preview to the PCTPA board first. So with that, I'll pass it to Clint Holdson.
Great, thank you, and thank you for having me this morning. So I will, Corey did a good job just kind of setting up how our 2 plans are very, very much related. All of the assumptions that go into the plan, they're the same. So our plan is a reflection of the Placer Transportation Plan and it is the federal document. So it gives you a lot of your permissions to go after federal grants, things like that. So these plans end up, the projects, things in them, all of those assumptions, they end up being kind of the same thing. So we'll absorb your plan into the regional plan. So this is the 6-county region. We're the MPO for the 6 counties under a federal designation, and then the RTPA for the 4 counties, Sacramento, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba. And then, of course, you've got PCTA, and in El Dorado, they have EDCTC. So the blueprint it's a federally and state mandated plan. We have to update this every 4 years. It has a whole lot of federal and state requirements. On the state side, PCTPA has to meet most of the same requirements we do. There's one element that we have to meet on the state side of the plan that the Placer plan does not have to address, and that is the greenhouse gas reduction target. And that requires us to look at both land use and transportation. So our plan has a lot more attention on land use and housing and jobs than you might see in the Placer plan, but they're still based on kind of the same set of assumptions. So early on in the process of updating these plans, our board adopts what we call a policy framework, and that just kind of is the overarching guardrails or goals of this plan, and it's what shapes all of the discussion and the analysis that we bring throughout the whole plan update, which takes between 2 and 3 years to do. These are very big plans. So the triple bottom line is what our board adopted for this, so advancing these co-equal goals of equity, so a plan that works for everyone, our economy and really investing in our tradable sectors and bringing wealth to the region, and then environment, where our region is about 75% just kind of open space, agriculture, working lands, and that's something that that the residents of the region very, very much value, and so protecting that it was also of utmost importance. So we took an additional 2 years on this plan. We got an extension from the state. And we were able to use that 2 years to do a lot more public outreach than we've done, more public outreach than we've done on any of these plans in the last 2 decades. We did focus groups, we did a poll, a scientific poll, we did pop-up workshops all around the region, so we were able to hit about 6,000 residents through all of our outreach. And what we heard, maybe not surprising to you, I think this may be right in line with what you may hear from your constituents and your residents. A couple things I'll highlight that just emerged as new concerns or real issues this plan that haven't been kind of forefront of people's minds in the past. Natural disasters, preparing for natural disasters, resiliency, protecting people and property was a very, very important and forefront of people's minds. Safety has always been kind of at the forefront of people's minds. But it's a little bit more nuanced is what we were hearing from this time. There is the safety on the roadway, safety from collisions, things like that. But there's also safety waiting for your bus. There's feeling safe from crime, walking down the street, riding your bike. That was another kind of an emerging theme that came out of our outreach. I already mentioned protecting and conserving our open space and our agriculture, our working lands. And then housing. Housing was the foremost, the largest kind of issue we heard percolate to the surface from residents. And it wasn't just more housing. It was more housing of different types of housing that is affordable and attainable and in different locations throughout the region for all stages of someone's life. So from your very first apartment, we need a lot more of those attached products so that people just getting their foothold, they have a place to go. Your first home, maybe you want to be closer to your job, but then when you're moving, we did hear loud and clear, majority of residents still value and want to live in the suburbs, in a single family home in the suburbs. But that is not necessarily true or feasible for them throughout their life. They may want to be closer to their jobs, move to the suburbs, raise kids. They may want to move out and be closer to a downtown or an active main street as they get older. That is not accessible to everyone in the region right now. There's a lot of fear that kids are not going to be able to move to the neighborhoods they grew up in. People that want to move out of the neighborhoods and downsize, it's more expensive to downsize from the house that you've been living in. So those were all very front of people's minds. So along with all of that outreach, we do a lot of technical analysis on this plan. And one of the first things we do is a forecast of how much is the region going to grow? So how many people do we need to accommodate over the next 30 years? This plan goes out to 2050. So we are the fastest growing region in the state. We expect to stay that way. Placer County is the fastest growing county in our region. About half of the population growth in Placer County in recent has been Bay Area immigrants moving into the county. We expect that our growth in the region and that Placer County will continue to be among the fastest growing in the region. About 16% of the regional population today. You capture about 20% of the growth that we're expecting over the next 25 years. But what we do expect is, oops, went the wrong way. What we do expect is to see that growth start to taper off, especially as we move into that 2040 to 2050 decade. This is not a regional issue. This is a kind of a nationwide, a state issue. Is we're just seeing growth, birth rates decline, population getting a little bit older. And so it's that 40 to 50 decade. We'll still see a lot of immigration, but some of those natural births and deaths are what you're seeing kind of in that declining growth rate. So an additional 300, almost 400,000 people is what we'd expect to come into Placer County, but to accommodate all of those, adding 174,000 jobs, almost 156,000 additional homes. So how do we go about, what does the plan do to accommodate all of these? So the strategy of the blueprint is really to try to reinvest in existing communities. So about 2/3 of all of that growth, that housing growth, that jobs growth, is happening within the existing footprint, so those darker areas on the map. The remaining growth is in those lighter blue areas, not the water bodies, sorry about the color mix-up there, but those lighter blue areas on the map are new growth areas. They may have started building homes today, but they haven't kind of passed that 50% built out. So everything in blue here, this isn't just your old downtowns, your older commercial corridors. They are in there, but this is also stuff that's just, it hasn't gone, it's kind of exceeded that 50% built out phase, but it's not all the way there. You may not have the school yet. You may not have the grocery yet. And this plan is really calling for those things to get built out, to build these complete communities so that people don't have to travel quite as far to get to the things they need on a daily basis. This is actually consistent, this about 2/3 happening in these areas, with what we've been seeing in the region. Where it varies from that and really starts to move into the ambitious territory is there's a lot more of that growth concentrated in those really infill areas, your rural main streets, your downtowns, your older commercial corridors. Now this is going to vary and it looks different in every community across the region, which is partially why we're wanting to go out and do this road show so we can kind of look at this plan from a more detailed lens. But the plan is calling for unlocking some of those growth potential areas that are in your local plans. This plan is 100% built from your local plans. There's nothing in here that isn't in a general plan or a specific plan. It's pulling from those and it's largely a phasing strategy for those. But those areas are very hard to unlock. There's infrastructure constraints, there's many other things. And so this plan has to have implementation policies and programs that help us to unlock those growth area potential. So where are we going from here? We are, I talked through the land use piece and what you're going to expect in Placer County in terms of growth. On the transportation side, kind of the theme of the plan is just doing more with less. It's about a $40 billion investment in transportation in the region by 2050. Sounds like a lot of money. It's not that much money. That's reflective of we're running about $400 to $500 million a year short right now on just maintaining our existing system region-wide. When we did the call for projects, Corey mentioned we do a joint call for projects. Region-wide, we got about $14 billion worth of system expansion, road and highway expansion requests. We only have money for about half of that. So the transportation project list that goes along with these plans, it's really a compromised solution. Not every jurisdiction gets everything that it hopes and wants. Those projects don't go away. They're still part of your local plans. There's chances to amend this plan. One thing we can guarantee is we didn't get everything right, which is why we update these plans continuously so we can course correct. But it really is about looking for maintaining our existing system. That's the biggest budget category in the plan, is trying to invest in just bringing our roads back to a good state of repair, or at least getting in front of the continued decline and deterioration. Looking to things like technology so that we can squeeze the most out of our existing roadways before we need to do the more expensive expansion. prioritizing lower cost, quicker build projects to bring safety improvements, things like that, much sooner and faster than you might be able to do a full reconstruction of a roadway. And then also plan for and be resilient to natural disasters. And this might be paying more attention to evacuation routes, maybe not seeing a lot of use today, but are there more than one way to get out of places in the region? So our board adopted those kind of prevailing, the land use assumptions and the transportation project list last year. In November, we wrapped that up. So now we're moving on to this is an ambitious plan. How do we actually achieve all of this? And so over the next couple of months, we'll be working with our board to develop our implementation policies. And those policies are really what drive kind of the programs, and they provide tools for jurisdictions around the region. You can look at the plan, say, hey, this project that we're coming to you for funding, federal or state government, is consistent with these regional plans, with this Placer regional plan, with this 6-county regional plan. It's part of something greater, and here's why we need the funding for it. And this is consistent with a plan that meets these state and federal goals and policies. So that's where we're going next and kind of how this plan works. Just as an example, a little bit of an example of how the plan kind of moves from just planning into action, these are some of the implementation programs we had. Kathleen's going to join you in just a moment to talk a bit more about mobility zones. But the Green Means Go program, that is our program. We've now got almost $60 million out throughout the 6 counties to pay for infrastructure, the under the street infrastructure that unlocks those infill areas, planning and infrastructure, so water, sewer, drainage. A lot of these areas that have a lot of housing potential were built more for commercial uses, and they just don't have the underground infrastructure to facilitate all that housing, but there's big plans for housing in some of these areas. So if we can get the public investment into those areas and ready them for investment from private investment and development, that can go a long way. And in Placer County, you've got about $6 million out of a $30 million pot that SACOG had to award. So Placer County jurisdictions did quite well in that funding round, and those projects are moving forward. Ready Set Trails is another project that we've got that's looking to connect communities throughout the region with over 1,000 miles of dedicated bicycle and pedestrian pathways. And then our Engage, Empower, and Implement program is SACOG looking to really increase the flexibility of some of the funding that we've got. We were able to put about $3 million into partnerships between local jurisdictions and community-based organizations so that they can co-create solutions for their community. And that project, those awards have been made, and we're just kind of going through and executing on those now. And then regional priority projects. Our board took action on these this past October, and you'll notice several Placer projects. The SR 65 Phase 1 project here, improved service on Capitol Corridor getting up to Roseville, the Sacramento Gateway project. These are all projects that kind of rose to the top as regional priorities, and that our board said these are things that we need to get in front of the federal and state governments for grants. So that's where these are coming from, and another way that SACOG and PCTPA kind of lean in to try to elevate the region's position at federal and state levels for funding. And I think, yep, that is all I've got, so I can stop there and see if you have any questions.
Any questions? Comments? Okay, well, thank
you.
you very much for the presentation. Very good. Matt, any comments about it?
No, I think Clinton did a great job, and just to echo what he's already said, you know, our staff and SACOG have really worked hand in glove to make sure everything that we're doing for the county and the 6 municipalities is in alignment so we can be prepared. And you'll hear in my executive director's report some of what we want to talk about locally regarding State Road 65 and what that looks like in a post-Measure B analysis. But we do all of this in alignment with SACOG, and when we go back to DC for cap to cap, we will have we'll all be talking from the same page as far as what our priorities are. And the build grant that we just put in for that $22 million for part of the Phase 1 of State Road 65, That was the only grant supported by SACOG in the six-county region, so we had their unwavering support in that grant application, and that goes a long way. So I think Clint did a great job in summarizing how we're working together.
He did, and I'm looking forward to being on that transportation committee. Okay, yeah, there are a couple. Okay, we're going to move on to item J, mobility zones presentation. Mike Costa?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, members of the board and public. I want to introduce Kathleen Hanley. She's a principal transportation planner with the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. She will be giving us a presentation on the Mobility Zones project, which stems from a federal grant that SACOG received to really look at and invest in opportunities to improve transportation and provide solutions for communities that are usually defined as needing equitable communities or disadvantaged communities. So Kathleen's going to explain a little bit about that project and the opportunities that exist. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks so much for the great introduction. As Mike said, I'm Kathleen. It's a real treat for me to be here this morning. I'm a very proud Placer County native, and I started my career here at PCTPA, so it's a nice treat to be back at the Domes before you this morning. So as Mike mentioned, I'm going to give you an overview of the Mobility Zones project that we have going on at SACOG. We're really kind of halfway in this project right now at a key decision point. So similar to Clint doing a road show around the region on the blueprint, I'm just doing a road show, getting the word out. Happy to take your feedback on what we've been working on. Today, I'm going to go over sort of the high-level scope of the project. It's really complicated, but I'm going to try to keep it very high level, but happy to dive in if anything kind of piques your interest. I'm going to talk specifically about the process that we use to identify 10 places to focus on across the six-county region for the remainder of the project, and then, of course, highlight where we've identified within Placer County and open it up for any questions and discussion. I like to say this project has really two main phases. The first is focused on identifying about 10 communities, roughly sort of neighborhood-ish sized places in the region that we call mobility zones. And then the second half of the project is all about trying to improve transportation within those zones. Of course, there's a lot of sub-steps, right? Layering information on top of each other to figure out where those 10 places should be. And as I mentioned, we're really kind of at the turning point here from phase 1 into phase 2, where we have this list of places we want to focus on for the remainder of the project and are looking to get feedback on the transportation needs within those communities. It's very hard to identify 10 places to focus on in 6 counties. Our region has diverse needs. There are diverse needs within Placer County, and we wish we could work everywhere. But really, the process to identify these 10 places has been very collaborative. So Mobility Zones has these committees that we meet quarterly with. You can see them listed there on the bottom. There's community committees, which have residents and community leaders, nonprofit organizations. So I have a Placer Community Committee that I meet with every quarter to get feedback directly from residents on their transportation needs. And then I also have a municipal committee. That's your public works or community development staff, who I also meet with every quarter. And then the technical committee, Mike sits on my technical committee, transit operators, air districts, right? Those other partners who aren't cities and counties, but still have a big role to play in transportation. So when I bring these steps before you and say sort of, we did this, we did that, this is the we I'm talking about, right? What I do is sort of staff these committees, bring before them this information so that together as agency and community partners, we can try to make decisions on how to move forward. Very simplifying the process that we use to identify these 10 places in the 6-county region, we started first by identifying the areas that have sort of demographic disparities, right, which we sometimes call equity needs. So what we did is map the areas across the 6 counties that have, low income, high cost of living, racial disparities, pollution burden, lots of seniors, lots of kids. But we didn't map that equally across all 6 counties. What we did first is put out a survey to understand, okay, which of these lists of demographic measures is most important to your community? And we kind of dialed up the measures that matter more in certain communities and dialed down the ones that aren't as important. So in Placer County, a lot bigger focus on low income, seniors, children, cost of living, right? In Sacramento, a lot more focus on racial disparities, immigration, different communities with different challenges. And so that gave us a really sort of like tailored and grassroots way of mapping demographic and equity need across the 6 counties. Then we identified transportation needs and opportunities. So this list shows you some of the ways that we measure where transportation is stronger and weaker across our 6 counties and put that into a map as well, trying to highlight the places that don't have good car ownership or don't have good access to transit, places where there's a lot of trucks cutting through neighborhoods and making it feel unsafe, places where there's a lot of crashes. And then effectively what we did, right, is stack those two maps on top of each other and try to identify the places where the two things overlap, where we see a lot of transportation challenges in the same places that we see a lot of sort of demographic inequities and differences in communities. And so that gave us a list of the areas in the region that could be a mobility zone. Of course, census data is not perfect, so we did a lot of qualitative analysis with your city and county staff and with our community partners to understand, like, is this right? Is what the data showing us bear out in what we see on the ground? And that got us to ultimately this online mapping tool that we used to put the pieces together. So I've summarized with those map visuals, but I've also provided a link to this online map in the staff report. You can click on any part of our region and see all the homework on this analysis that we did. What are some of the indicators? So happy to provide that to you all and your staff as a tool. So once we layered those two maps on top of each other, we identified 23 places across the 6-county region that we think have a balance of transportation needs and some equity challenges, including 4 of which were identified in Placer County. Now, I wish I could work on all 23 at the same time, but we're only scoped to work on 10 as a first phase across the 6-county region. So working with the community partners and agency staff, we went through a region-wide prioritization process to narrow down everybody's zones across all the counties. And so from these 4, which are right, sort of Sunrise, Kirby, the kind of Roseville Heights part of Roseville, Taylor Road on both the Rockland and the Loomis sides, and North Auburn above the city border into sort of kind of the airport county offices area, and then Forest Hill. And ultimately, the area that was chosen to move forward in phase 1 is North Auburn for Placer County. Anytime I go from 4 to 1, right, that's a challenging thing for me to do. A lot of the discussion with the community was on the kind of inherent inequity of the South County versus the foothills, right? That there are just some challenges that make life harder and transportation harder in the foothills that aren't present in the South County. And so that's why folks wanted to see sort of a mid-county foothills zone move forward in phase 1. We put together what we call zone profiles. So this shows a lot of the information that led us to choose North Auburn as the place to focus on for phase 1. So you can see that it has, 35% of folks living in this area are people of color, 22% are low income. That's very high for Placer County. And some of the real physical barriers, right? 49 is a big challenge. PCTPA has worked a lot on improving things on 49. And so what we're going to be doing, working closely with county staff in particular, is focusing on this area and trying to improve transportation over the coming years. So I'm really here to let you know that we're trying to focus on North Auburn, get any feedback if you have any on some of the needs you see in North Auburn, and really just raise awareness about what we have going on at SACOG on the Mobility Zones project. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Board members, questions, comments? I do, excuse me, I do have one question. On the areas where you were listing.
Sure.
The special issues. Well, are those listed in order of priorities?
No.
Oh, okay.
You're referring to these 2 lists, right? Mm-hmm. These aren't listed in order of priority. Okay. And what I'm really proud of in this project is that SACOG staff didn't sit down and prioritize these, right? I put a survey out to the community members to say which of these are your priority. Mm-hmm. And so each county has a slightly different ordering and a slightly different weighting of these metrics, which is just the truth of, right, how our communities are and what their challenges are.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you so much for your presentation. Very well done.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on now to item K, preliminary draft FY 25-26 overall work program and budget. Take it away. Who's going to do this one? Jody. There we go. Jody. Good morning.
Good morning. This is the start of our fiscal year 25-26 budgeting process. The overall work program and budget is an annual tool that we use to plan, budget, and outlines the use of our state, federal, and local funds, and outlines the planning activities and deliverables broken down by work element for the fiscal year, which runs from July 1st through June 30th. And the development of this document is a collaborative effort of all staff at PCTPA. It is then reviewed, and we receive concurrence from the Technical Advisory Committee to bring forward to you at the board, and then it goes on to Caltrans for their comments, and we will bring this document back to you in May for the final approval of next year's budget. And as you can see, this is a fluid document, and it gets amended several times a year as new information becomes available. So the assumptions that we used in this budget, it starts with 7 FTE, and then through attrition, it goes down to 5 due to 2 retirements we are planning for next year. And we did add a 3% COLA to the salary schedule. We updated the PERS contributions and our unfunded PERS liability, and then our local transportation funding at this point is flat and will be amended in the final document. And so our staffing, this is a look at the larger changes that occurred in this budget over this current fiscal year. The staffing changed, as I mentioned earlier. It ends up being a $130,000 reduction and an hour reduction of 1,920 hours. On additional expenses for direct cost, work element 47, which was the South Placer, South Sutter fair share, actually ended in this current fiscal year and has been removed in this 25-26 budget. And our indirect cost rate is increasing 1.76% to be at 47.86%. This is just a look at the budget overview as it compares with the current amendment that you have approved earlier this fall. We do have a balanced budget, I'm happy to say, with a surplus of $412,000 at this time, and we are meeting our surplus requirements. And just a look at our revenue, the way it comes in, or the different areas of revenue that we receive. Over 90% of these funds are on a reimbursement basis, which means we have to expend the funds first and then request reimbursement. So that's why our ending fund balance is very important to us. So we can continue on the process of making sure we have enough money to pay the bills. And then a look at our expenditures. 96% of our expenditures are going to a direct cost or direct work elements, while the remaining 4% are operating cost of the agency. And then this slide just shows all of our work elements that are included in this document. The 2 largest bars are the I-80 aux lanes and the State Route 49 sidewalk gap closure. And those are construction and support costs through Caltrans. I-80 aux lanes is looking to complete at the end of this fiscal year. We're expecting Caltrans invoices to pay for the project to come in next fiscal year. So we budgeted for that. And that ends my presentation, unless you have any questions. Staff, any questions?
Thank you. Questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Madam Chair, thank you very much for the presentation, and I appreciate that we have a balanced budget and we've got reserves, the surplus going to reserves. Thank you so much. Just a quick question. I know we have the 2 retirements happening mid-year, so there's no anticipation of filling those?
So Director, at this point in time, what we're anticipating on doing is not filling those and probably looking to increase our amount of bench consultants from the private sector. So we'll put out a bench contract, look to supplement some of those skills that, the rest of the staff that's remaining doesn't have. We've got an amazing person in David, who's a phenomenal grant writer who will be retiring, and of course, Rick, who's our chief engineer as well. So we'll be looking to hire consultant engineering and grant writing services, as well as probably procuring folks for, airport services, transit planning, comms and outreach, things like that. So the idea is to stay staffed with the 5 FTE and rely more on the private sector in the delivery of our services.
Okay, so then we can probably anticipate in next year's budget, there you'll have additional funds for contracting purposes, and you won't have as much for FTE, so just shift.
Right, yeah, we have already internally estimated what we think those consultant contracts will look like, and we more than have that in labor and surplus to make up for that.
Great, thank you very much. That was all that I had, Madam Chair.
Okay, yes, please.
Matt, and so it sounds like the strategy is to, kind of backfill lower amount of staff resource with consultant resource. Would you be able to, and we should be able to, kind of track that so that like at the end of year 1 and year 2 of that strategy, we can go back and maybe get a roll-up report on how much we spent on those consulting services as compared to what the equivalent cost would have been if we'd had full-time staff to provide that, make sure that we're getting, that the consultant services are in fact the best kind of financial value to the agency.
We can absolutely take a note and make sure we report back to you on it. And yeah, if we get to a point in time where we feel we need some person, for 2,080 hours a year, and it would be better just to bring them on board internally and give them, a benefit package and everything else, we'll likely look to do that. We as PCTPA and all of the other things that we do, when, the chair read that long list of everything we do, have operated at 7 FTE for a long time. Quite frankly, with such a small staff and such a broad scope of things that we have to do, it's hard to find that unicorn person.
Yeah.
We have, those people have, if you look at somebody like, David has learned and become so proficient in grant writing, airport land use commission support, all those sorts of things, to go out to the market and find that exact person to replace David is very difficult. And so if we do identify that person over time and can bring them on board, and it's a cost saving to the agency, we'll do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. And then just final point on that, we could also make sure we're capturing the amount of effort spent on consultant procurement and management.
Yeah.
Because that also takes resource in addition to the actual invoices that get paid out to the consultant team.
Yeah, and a little bit, because you asked a little bit of a deeper dive on that, we would anticipate that these would be sort of bench contracts, right? So we would reach out to the consultant industry, ask for a 5-page proposal, want to see an org chart, resume, qualifications. I don't envision for this, when I used to be on the consultant side, we would call these, fishing licenses. I don't envision for all of these we would, ask for 20-page proposals, written, shortlist them, make them come in to present, just to have the opportunity to maybe get some work for us one day. So it will be a bit of a modified procurement, and I think we have a good sense of what the competition in that space looks like, in the region.
Thanks. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm just wondering, can you look into your crystal ball? Why is the Ox Lane exiting at Rockland finished, but the one at Douglas and Riverside is not? Anybody have any
Let me
ideas?
ask David.
That is a,
David's our project
that is
manager on
the
that.
biggest mess.
Yeah, I have a guess, but he'll have an answer.
Good, thanks. Okay,
We can't pave. Pavement has, doing the final paving has to occur at night because of restrictions on closing down ramps and travel lanes. And the weather right now is too cold to complete the paving. And so the eastbound lane was easier to construct. And so westbound, because we also had to build a bridge for the 5th lane over Kirby Creek. So it just took long.
yeah. Okay, well, we'll forgive them then. Wasn't, not happy. I don't go, I don't take the I don't take the Douglas one anymore. I haven't for a while because it's,
I will note that the project is on schedule and it's due to be completed, as Jody noted, by the end of this fiscal year. So.
okay, all right. Okay, before we go further, then I'm going to ask for public comment. Any public comment on this? Oh, good, okay.
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of the budget as proposed.
Oh, we've got public comment first.
Oh, I thought there was no public comment. I apologize.
That's okay. No
We have Mike online.
Mike Garabedian, you're free to speak. Mr. Garabedian, you're free to speak.
That's scary.
Okay.
Not able to
Well,
unmute?
I
Michael, can you unmute?
Mr. Garabedian, can you unmute? Here he goes.
There we go.
Yeah, maybe he's not.
Okay,
You're free to speak. Okay, well,
we're not able to hear you, Michael, in case.
It looks like he's trying to talk because it's not green.
no. Okay.
Okay,
We'll move on.
we'll have to move on. Yes, okay. So, Alice?
Yes, I'll move approval of the budget as proposed. Thank you.
I second.
Okay, motion by Davin Calvio and second by Cortez. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, then we're going to move on to L, our annual Unmet Transit Needs Assessment Report and Findings for FY 25-26. Mike, good morning.
Good morning again, Madam Chair, members of the board, Mike Costa. I just wanted to give an overview a little bit of what this process is. As the Regional Transportation Planning Agency for Placer County, PCTPA administers what's called the Transportation Development Act, or TDA, funding pot. And in that pot, there are three different sources of funds that come under TDA that this region distributes to our local jurisdictions. Local transportation funds, or LTF, being the primary source of funds is what we're going to focus on today. The state transit assistance funds and the state of good repair funds go directly to our transit operators. So those funds are something that our local jurisdictions use directly for transit services and capital needs and that sort of thing. But for the local transportation funds, or LTF for short, those funds, which are generated from a quarter cent general sales tax statewide, come into our region, and while they are first and foremost intended for public transit services, TDA actually allows those funds to be used for other purposes, such as streets and road maintenance needs, which our jurisdictions actually do use LTF for that purpose. Before we can do that, though, before we can actually distribute LTF to our local jurisdictions for other purposes, we do have to conduct this annual process called the Unmet Transit Needs Assessment process, which I'll go through today. And in that process, once we determine that there are no unmet transit needs that are determined also to be reasonable to meet, then we can distribute those funds accordingly for other purposes. So what is an unmet transit need, and what defines reasonable to meet criteria? So our board, this board, actually established the parameters for what an unmet transit need is and what reasonable to meet is back in January of 2022. The criteria that you see before you essentially for unmet transit needs is for services or transit needs that either do not exist today or are required to address Americans with Disability Act needs, or ADA needs. For reasonable to meet criteria, essentially that's the second component that we as staff have to look at when we're evaluating comments in this process. And those generally revolve around an idea that if an unmet transit need is identified, in order to implement that service to address that need, that service has to be something that's viable, feasible, and regularly supported by either our current planning efforts, our long-range planning efforts, or general public support. So we have to look at both sets of criteria when we're looking at an unmet transit need and then determining further if it's reasonable to meet. So every year we start this process typically in the fall, where we go out into the community, we go out to your local jurisdictions, we attend several different events or address your governing bodies to announce the annual assessment process. And in that process, we provide a survey that is released to the general public, and that survey is to solicit comments on potential unmet transit needs. Any comments are welcome in that process. During that process, which usually lasts, in this case, from September through October, we collect and gather the unmet transit needs, and then we assess those needs following the closure of the survey based on the criteria that I showed in the previous slide. We also convene what's called the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, or SSTAC. That is required under TDA regulations that we have one. And that body actually reviews the unmet transit needs as well, all of the comments, staff's evaluation of the comments, and then makes the recommendation to this board for a formal determination in that process. So the SSTAC looks at it first, and then this board looks at the final product and the recommended findings. So what did we do? As I mentioned, we do go out into the community. We do hold a public hearing as well at this governing body here at our board. That public hearing was held in October for this year's assessment. And then, we do make, per our Title VI program requirements, we do make the survey available in English, Spanish, and Tagalog. And then we also go into various, where staff is able to go to various local events where we pop up, so to speak, to engage the public and ask them again about what they feel are certain transit and transportation needs. It's important to note that in this process, we hear a lot of comments, and I'll go through that in the next slide. I'll kind of overview some of those comments, but even if we don't define or identify unmet transit needs based on the criteria that I mentioned in the previous slide, these comments are still very valuable to us because through our regular planning efforts like the comprehensive operational analysis and the short-range transit plan and all the coordination that we do at PCTPA with our regional operators, we still want to improve transit services. So a lot of these comments go into those efforts even if they're not defined formally as an unmet transit need. This year, and this assessment, we did identify 119 comments that we received through various different forms, primarily through the survey. Of those, 15 of those comments were identified as meeting the unmet transit need definition. And then one was actually identified as meeting the unmet transit need definition and also being reasonable to meet. So 1 out of the 119 comments essentially was identified as an unmet need that was reasonable to meet. However, I will say that in the course of this process, when that was identified, the city of Roseville actually ended up addressing that need in January to where it was no longer determined to be an unmet need. So this report acknowledges that. General themes that we've heard, which kind of reoccur every year in regards to unmet transit needs, and this is no surprise, but better connections through our South Placer region, better connections through our different cities, primarily Lincoln, Rockland, and Roseville, and connections over to the Sacramento area, including the airport area, and more frequent service. We hear, convenience is a factor in transit services, and so we hear about more frequency. One area, of course, no surprise, and it currently has no transit services, is the Forest Hill region. So we did receive some comments about unmet transit needs in that area. They were determined to be unreasonable to meet because the cost to provide public transit in that rural, remote area far exceeds essentially the demand and the benefit that would be generated from it. And so that need will probably continue to show up. We are looking, I would say, as staff at alternative solutions, looking at potentially our Placer Rides program as well as filling some of that need in those rural areas. But one area that didn't show up, actually, that has showed up in the past is Sheridan. Sheridan also, we did make a very focused effort in the past year to expand Placer Rides to some of the folks in Sheridan and work with them very closely to get them eligible and on board with that Placer Rides program that's administered by our partners at Seniors First. And we hadn't heard any unmet needs in Sheridan this year. So that was, again, shows you the success of even if something not being an unmet transit need that's reasonable to meet, we still work continually to try to get solutions out into certain areas. And then we did hear about some needs up in the Tahoe area and getting connections from the western or southwestern portion of Placer County up into the Tahoe Basin is somewhat of a need too, primarily around some of the more touristy or peak ski season timeframes. And I know Corey is working on efforts with the regional consortium of partners up in the Tahoe Basin to look at opportunities to get connections from this part of the region into the Tahoe Basin and into Reno. So after all of that analysis, again, a combination of staff analysis as well as input from our Social Services Transportation Advisory Council made the recommendation in the report that's before you that there are no unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet for the next fiscal year or fiscal year 25-26. The report also goes into details about some of our additional analysis on transit-dependent populations. It talks as well about how we've historically spent LTF and what we've looked at for our operations and how our general operations are happening in the South Placer region and some of our other efforts that we're doing. So with that, the SSTAC and our Technical Advisory Committee as well for this board met and concurred that the report is complete and that the staff recommendation of having no unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet for the next fiscal year is something that we wanted to recommend to the board. So with that, I am asking for the board's concurrence on those findings and accepting the report as complete for this year's assessment. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Board members, questions, comments? Yes?
Madam Chair, yes, just really quickly, on the Forest Hill, I know that there's been some discussions. I think I've had them with Supervisor Gustafson, who's, and obviously Auburn as well, but maybe an on-demand, opportunity, some kind of an on-demand ride program to provide them with some transit. It's not a consistent but it's something, so, I know they're thinking about that, so.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm curious, unmet needs assessment, do you only assess cities? I mean, talked mostly about cities here.
We assess the entire county, including the unincorporated areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
No unmet needs in Granite Bay?
Unmet needs, yes, but potentially not rising to the reasonable to meet criteria.
Okay. Tell that to the RENA rezone committee, okay? That's one of the things that we're supposed to be meeting, but we have no transit in Granite Bay. Okay. All right, aired my personal opinion there. Any public comment on this?
We do have one, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Eklund, you're free to speak.
Thank you very much. First of all, I have no comments on the plan itself. It's always very well done. It meets the criteria and deserves to be accepted as is. And I've reviewed the plan, each plan probably for the last 6 or 7 years, and they're all very well done. The problem is and even last year, I had the pleasure of actually working on the SSTAC as part of it, and I really enjoyed that process. The problem with the overall thing, it's not a planning process. It wasn't designed to be a planning process, and it really isn't. You can't have a transit planning process when you're looking at individual trips. That just doesn't work. I think the process needs to have a little more context. That's where it can be useful. And Mike is right. There needs to be some carryover of information here, forward until the next overall planning process. And I hope that can happen. Between the last short-range transit plan and this one, 7 years, nothing has happened. There hasn't been any interim work going on, and that needs to change somehow. I don't know how it happens. In terms of context, what I really mean is there's been really major changes in the funding of both road repairs and transit. And so the actual LFT percentage really is each year is meaningless. You take in all the COVID money, the fact that LFT has had an increase from 2009 to 2024 of 107%, which is more money for road repairs and transit. So there needs to be some context of what reasonable means. And I think each city needs to decide on its own what is a reasonable amount for transit and work around that. Each year they have to cobble together a bunch of money for both transit and things. And it's impossible from what's the information in the UTN to really find out what the context is moving forward to the needs. So I think that's important. And just one example of context, the COA, they only went back to 3 years looking at the results of past UTNs. They should go back 7 years. There's no difference between any one of the years. They're in terms of the quality and the need. There has to be 7 years. I took Wildcat Corridor, for example. For 5 years, I found 19 examples of people requesting trips or service. And some of them were quite angry. They consider themselves second-class citizens because they had no transit, no fixed route transit at all. And then I looked in the COA. Wildcat Corridor was not even mentioned. That whole corridor was not even mentioned. There was 19 examples in the past 7 years. So if you're going to carry things forward, do it in a systematic way so your results are accurate.
Mr. Eklund, could you please wrap up your comments? I'm sorry, but your time's expired.
Okay, no, it's just context. That's really what I think is important.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Appreciate that. Okay. All righty, let's bring it back to the board then, if there are no other comments, right? Okay, good, I'll make sure. For action.
I'll move approval of the annual unmet transit needs assessment report and findings for 25-26.
I'll second. Okay, motion by Dowden Calvillo, second by Cortez.
Cortez. Forget who I am again.
Just my
Ginkgo Biloba.
And I wrote it down too. Sorry about that. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. My numerous apologies for that. Okay, we're moving on to item M, Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just quickly, Mike wanted me to, while we're on the subject of transit, remind everybody, so you can remind your constituents and others, that we are engaged in the short-range transit plan update, and that goal is to jointly implement the COA service plans over the next 5 years. There is a public survey out there right now. If anybody is interested, concerned citizens, and they want their voices heard, they can go out to pctpa.net, search for it. They'll find the SRTP survey, and that'll allow them to, weigh in as far as transit service into the future. Just really quickly, as we're winding down today, last month we brought forward and sort of did a deep dive on Measure B and where the vote totals were and what happened and what didn't happen, and sort of wanted to just sort of move forward and let you all know. The big thing is, and we sort of teased this a little bit earlier in the meeting, that we did get our build grant in on time. And so to all of those who helped us with letters of support, your city managers and everything else, thank them very much. So we've submitted our $22 million for the build grant. It's about $29 million in scope. Well, how does that work? Because $7 million, which is a local match, will need to be made, will be made by Sparta, by developer impact fees. And so what you're seeing there in the larger map is the actual scope of the project that was put into the build grant. It adds one general purpose lane between Blue Oaks to Galleria, and then an auxiliary lane between Pleasant Grove and Galleria. And this is really what you see, right? Southbound 65 has about 10 hours of congestion on average Monday through Friday, about 6 to 7 hours of congestion on Saturday, even 3 to 4 hours on Sunday. And so that gives you a sense of, this isn't just home-based work trips or the commute trip. This is really, just insufficient to handle the amount of volume as housing and, has come online and trips have been generated. Once we receive this money, this should go a long way in helping out with that bottleneck there, which is, according to Caltrans District 3, and if you also look at the SACOG modeling, this is one of the top 4 bottlenecks in the entire district's region. So we're actively working on that, working collaboratively with Congressman Kiley's office. He's been amazing. Bob Holste is Chief of Staff as well. So this build grant, just as a way of a reminder, it's got to be technically right, but it is also then a grant made in the office of the Secretary. So Secretary Duffy will have final say. So, continuing to talk to the Secretary's office about the importance of this. There's only $150 million in the entire United States of America for this program, and we're trying to get $22 million of it for, we think we're big potato, we're big here in Placer, but there'll be a lot of competition. It usually has a hit rate of about 12%. But we're very confident. If you look over in the little bit of the inset, you'll see what is the State Road 65, what I've just term of our ultimate plan that we discussed, and many of those phases were inside of the larger expenditure plan for the measure. What you see in blue as in phase 1, that is what is in the build grant. That is the same scope. So it leads us to say, well, geez, what are we going to do about all of the green and yellow? And really what we have to understand is without Measure B, that's all gone, right? There is no funding for that. And I got a email earlier in the week from a citizen who said, hey, I live, and I won't even name the municipality, but it's in the north. And it says, I live there and I work in Sacramento and I take 65 every day. And I didn't vote for the measure, but what are you going to do to fix it? And so my response literally was leave your house earlier. And because it's the truth. I'm on 65 every day at about 6:40 in the morning, and it's fine. But by 7 it is not fine. But all joking aside, it leads us to sort of think about what can we do? And so when I onboarded 2 years ago, November of 22, that ultimate scope, that inset, that's what we as PCTPA have talked about. A lot of that is environmentally cleared. Some of it's physically designed. And so this has been what we've gone around to all of your communities for a decade talking about. And the point of this conversation this morning is to say, we've got to move on. We've got to pivot. You heard Clint talk a little bit about this, about we have to talk about what we can afford. And there was, in the assumption of this ultimate scope, that there would be this magic money. And we thought that money would come from the measure. But we should be clear that even inside of the measure, we didn't have full funding for this ultimate scope. It was to use the measure money and leverage state and federal resources. So we sit in a time where the state is not interested in expanding any highway capacity. They're not interested in funding it, and they might not even want to permit it. And so that is our reality. So this is why we're going the federal route, because there are buckets of money there. But there isn't a big enough bucket of money for this ultimate scope. So we really do have to start to think about and reimagine State Road 65. I think it is professionally the responsible thing to do, to walk around and say, well, this ultimate scope is on a project list, and because it's on this project list, it's real. You know, I think it's slightly disingenuous. So we need to reimagine what we can do on State Road 65, because as I said, what's in the build scope should help considerably with the existing congestion. But we've got Village 5 in Lincoln, we've got Placer 1 in the county, we've got 8, 10, 12,000 homes coming online. As part of those specific plans, and these developers have entitlement, they're not building another north-south route down to I-80. And we know, and our friends at SACOG can tell you, the average trip length from our county in the morning is about 19 miles. It's pretty long because we don't have a lot of office space. The most that we have is on Douglas, but a lot of these people, like the citizen who wrote me, you know, they're going downtown. And so we need to facilitate that, and we need to prepare for that growth so we're not perpetually in this process. So really, that's what we're going to do this year. We're going to work aggressively to figure out what does a reimagined State Road 65 look like, because all trips really aren't the same. You have local traffic that gets on for one interchange and gets off. You have medium distance traffic, and then you have longer distance traffic. And this spine will continue to be the main spine that's going to connect all that future housing to the employment market of Sacramento for a long time. And it gets to what's in bold. What can we really afford, and what type of funding and financing is available? So the good news is we will be having a multi-hour workshop this Friday. We'll be going to Marysville and sitting down with District 3 and basically bringing a roll plot and talking about what can we do to prepare for the future of State Road 65 and understand what they are willing to accept. Because ultimately, you know, we are the regional planners and we're the bankers, but we don't deliver this. This is the Caltrans facility, and they will ultimately deliver it. So we'll start that conversation this Friday with our partners at Caltrans to make sure we can get internally aligned about what this new future looks like, and we'll continually bring the board updates as we move through the process this year. I would envision coming back to you sometime in the middle of the year, asking for contract authority to put together a PID, a project initiation document. We'll look to probably get consultant support on that to actually begin the sort of paperwork, if you will, in a formal process to get the new reimagined State Road 65 sort of programmed and into the Caltrans pipeline. With that, I'll take questions.
Okay, board members, questions, comments?
Just a couple questions or comments from that. Did you say when you hear back from the build and then what that projected timeline would look like?
We'll hear from Build in July. And then, oh gosh, if we hear in July, when would we get money following February? I don't remember the
When you
timeline.
go into design,
It's
multi-year.
Yeah.
it's up to a year for the
Say again?
contracting. It's up to a year for the contracting process with USDOT.
Go ahead, Mary.
Well, just probably since your last meeting, you know, in Roseville, we opened Roseville Parkway, which is
I
supposed to help.
use it every morning, thank you.
If we're using it before everyone else finds out about it, right?
Yeah.
You know, which is meant to alleviate some traffic from Pleasant Grove and Blue Oaks. But, you know, in Roseville, we're in the design phase now of the widening of Blue Oaks overpass over the railroad tracks. But, you know, just to underscore your point around adding residents, you know, just even only west of Fittiman, the city anticipates adding 21,000 people over the next 5 years. And that doesn't account for everything east of that or what Rockland brings on the other side and Lincoln. So it definitely underscores the need, you know, without that, you know, Placer Parkway is not a reality yet. We're having troubles heading out to 99 on Baseline. So just appreciate all of your work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're, you know, lots of times you want to kind of tell people, well, you see what it's like out there? That's as good as it's ever going to be, right? But I honestly think we can make it better than that by relieving that bottleneck. And, you know, I think, yeah, the city and the county, relative to all of that western growth is doing a phenomenal job on that. But that State Road 65, that spine for that residential development that's approved just north of the city of Roseville, you know, that is all just going to come down. And we know right now about 20% of that southbound 65 traffic right now gets off at Pleasant Grove every morning to come down Roseville Parkway, right? So it's already cutting through, and the same with, you know, on the Rockland side as well. So we want to try to, that traffic wants to be on State Road 65. It gets off because it thinks it's a better way. And because I'm a little bit of a planner and a geek, you know, I've done speed and delay runs of my own trip, and I go down Roseville Parkway and I go up to Blue Oaks and get on State Road 65 and I bring it, and they're within, you know, 60 seconds of one another. It's the same it's the same length of time right now.
Yep.
So
It's a
yeah.
perception of just to keep moving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, right.
I think that was a motto somewhere, right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Matt, where might the 65-80 interchange come into all this?
So going in the air costs a lot of money. The direct-to-direct HOV ramps that are in the ultimate Interstate 80 I-65 build-out are $300 million alone. And that's where I would come forward and say, we've got to talk about what we can really afford. And is that really a necessity? Probably not. The other thing, because I was focusing on 65, we will be also at this workshop talking about what an improved Interstate 80 I-65 looks like. Can we basically lengthen the queue of the eastbound to northbound State Road 65 so there's more storage to get those cars sort of off to the side, right? So in the evening, right? I know there's been historical complaints about the design speed of that ramp and all of that, and that's that is true, but really it's getting to there. And what you also really have there, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but I've been around a minute and I've been in that corridor a lot. You have a lot of weaving with Taylor. If I were to speak candidly, I'd say the best thing you could do would be close Taylor.
I agree.
Right? But closing access is very difficult to do. But what has happened over time is you've taken an interstate, not you all, not me, not us, but over time what has happened is we've put in so much access that the operations of the interstate have been compromised. And it doesn't also help that we have an HOV lane going under 8065. So for all intents and purposes, people are narrowed down to two general purpose lanes to get past that very high volume movement of 80 to 65, and it all sort of congeals. Ideally, what you would do is you'd say, basically you'd be able to say, you know what, all vehicles can use this lane during these 90 minutes of the day because we really want that actual extra functional capacity. So there are operational things you could do. And again, Clint said it very, very well, talking about what SACOG's looking at. How do we think smarter? How do we do more with less? And so we will also be bringing those ideas to 8065. Because honestly, 8065, you could solve a lot of that very inexpensively if certain regulatory bodies were willing to think differently and do things a little bit differently.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Any other partners out there we could look for money? Hard Rock is up there. I mean, could bring,
Well, I would say UAIC has been a tremendous partner in the build grant. They supplied us a letter of support. They've also offered to go with us as part of our lobbying back to DC. So they have just been rock solid for us. Whether that can translate into financial support, we'll see. I think what we need to do first is get alignment between Caltrans, who ultimately is going to give us the thumbs up, thumbs down on our concept, and then bring forward a concept for potential funding partners to respond to. We have federal reauthorization coming. We have a congressman who's on the House T&I committee, specifically the Highway Subcommittee, who's a great friend, right, to this agency and to the county.
Right.
So we will look for other federal grant opportunities. We will look for, quite frankly, and I'm not ashamed to say it, we'll look for federal earmarks as part of reauthorization.
Sure.
So we will actively look at all of those things. And if there's opportunities at the state or regional level as well. But then, yeah, the question is depending on the concept, you know, can we look at sort of an infrastructure bank? Can we look at bonding? So not just funding, but also financing methods to bring money forward. So we will look at all of that.
right, right. And also too, we should throw in the mix is using Beale Air Force Base as part of the, you know, I mean, their folks all live in Placer County.
They do. 4,000
Yeah.
4,000 employees live in our county and use State Road 65 every day. And we got a letter from the commanding colonel as well. That is in the build grant application package. You know, because a lot of people don't realize that's the Ninth Reconnaissance Wing, and that's the raw data collection for all the intelligence that winds up at the Pentagon
Right.
every morning.
And they're looking to add another SpaceX program. They have one, they want to add another.
Yeah, so there's
Hopefully they'll grow.
a very strong national security nexus there as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. If there are no other questions?
I have a question.
Oh, yes, please.
Thanks, Madam Chair. What's it take to get the HOV lane moved back another mile and a half besides black paint and a torch to go cut the sign out? Because I have them both in my truck, so we can go take care of it right now.
You know, we have a former Caltrans employee here who might, no, I'm not picking, that's not fair. She's like, I did my part, I just want a donut at this point. So, no, it's not, yeah, it's obviously not about the work. It's about the policy and seeing, now, I don't know when that project was done, what sort of funds were used or what sort of environmental document was used to clear it, because depending on that, it might not be, you know, possible because of how the project was permitted and funded. That's what we have to, that's what we have to investigate. Honestly, that'll be a tall hurdle because it's open and it's been extended past, you know, on its way to Rockland before it drops. So it would be difficult. It'll probably be easier to close an interchange than have them change the operating hours of an HOV lane in California.
Right, I mean, you're talking maybe a mile.
I know, it's nothing. It's nothing. And, you know, you have a 40%, 45% violation rate on it right now.
Or more.
Right, or more. Yeah. So, you know, yeah.
Not that I do it, but.
No, you don't do it. I've never done it. I've never done it.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
It's the end of my report.
Okay. We're going to move on to item N. Board members, any direction to the staff? No? Okay. Yeah, wipe out the diamond line. Yeah, yeah. Okay, then we're going to go to item O, informational items, because we want to inquire, is there a member of the public who would like to speak on the informational items as presented? Okay, all right. Well, then it looks like we have reached the end of our meeting. If there's no further item.
If I could, through the chair, I apologize. I just remind,
Sure.
just a real quick movie teaser. I know some of you are going to Cap this year. I think 4 of you, but not all of you. In the past, we've on that Sunday gone to our federal lobbyists and got a presentation. You know, we were thinking this year, because we've got some new members and not everybody will be in DC, we're not going to do that in DC on that Sunday. So next month at our March board meeting, we're going to have Mike Miller of TFG give a longer than normal, you know, annual federal update. He'll probably be with us on Zoom. He might be here in person if his travel allows, but just as a teaser for next month's meeting, you're going to get a nice long federal update. And the reason we pushed it out is because we all know DC is really, I guess I'll say fluid right now, quite dynamic. But just look out for that at next month's meeting, so the entire board can get the benefit of that federal update.
Great, thank you for that information, Mike. If there's no other information to come before the board, meeting is adjourned. See you all next month.